to NOI's 2024 new draft RTO Standards Series. We are so happy to have you back. So far, we have covered all of standards 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, and today we are talking about 1.5, which is all about validation. Before we get too much into it, please make sure that if you haven't, you've hit that subscribe button, that you've hit that like button, maybe comment if you feel free to do so. It certainly does help us with our algorithm and YouTube and all those sorts of things. But more importantly, it just helps us to keep bringing good content to you. And guys, we've got so much good content this year. So moving on to validation under the new standards, what used to be like 1.9 to 1.11, or what's currently 1.9 to 1.11 is going to be the new 1.5. And what it effectively says is the assessment system is quality assured by appropriately skilled and credentialed people through a regular process of validating assessment practices and judgments. Now, guys, part of this we are not going to be able to comment on yet because the credential policy has still not been released as of today, which is 23/1/24. So as this policy comes out, obviously we'll be able to reflect on it and discuss it in a little bit more detail. However, in general, it is probably going to say the same sorts of things. People who are going to be undertaking validation need to hold a combination of the qualification, industry skills, TAE. So you're looking for some combination of that, but that's actually not what we want to focus on today. There's a couple of points that I found really interesting within the new standards that I did want to highlight because I think that they do potentially mean you've got to make some updates or just review and touch back on your validation policy. So 1.5C says that the RTO demonstrates how it uses a risk-based approach to determine the component of the training product to be validated and the sample size of assessments. So hopefully this means that we're moving away from the standard ASCO calculator, not really a big fan of it, and using more of what's called like a risk-based approach. So the way that we handle this within NOI is basically we've got like a risk rating of systems. So depending on like who your cohort is, what the duration is, whether it's one of the qualifications listed on ASCO's risk of priorities, whether or not it's on your cohort is on ASCO's risk of priorities, have there been complaints associated with it? So we've got a whole range of different factors that we take into account, and then based on that, the course gets a score and then it gets risk rated. So as you would do with like any kind of JSA, you work out what the likelihood is of like something going wrong and what the general risk rating is of the course. And then based on the risk rating of the course, we have different requirements for validation. So if, for example, you are talking about a course where there's no massive safety concerns for the course, so like, for example, nursing would be a high safety risk, high risk courses. Those sorts of courses have very, very high risks, whereas something like retail, lower risk of a course, right? So if it's a high risk course, then it undergoes more rigorous and more regular validation, right? Your student numbers are going to factor into that as well. So obviously, of course, you've got 2 students in versus a course that you're putting through 2,000 students a year. You're going to do a lot more validation on the course that's 2,000 students a year. If the students are under 18 versus an over 18 cohort, if they're a vulnerable cohort, things like that. So you take all that into account, and based on whether it's a low, high, or medium risk rating, that actually determines the outcomes that then flow on from that in relationship to like the intensity and the regularity with which you undertake assessment. So that's kind of the way that we've dealt with it, but I like the fact that they've brought in that language of how you are using a risk-based approach to determine the validation, the sample size, rather than just going off something like what is the pure number of students and what's the pure number of assessment outcomes. I think that is a factor, but I definitely don't think that's the only factor. So I think this idea, this concept of a risk-based approach is much more sensible for the regulator, actually makes a lot more sense for RTOs as well. But it's probably not necessarily something that you guys already have built into your policies and procedures. So it's definitely something to start thinking of as you're progressing throughout the year, okay? The other part, so he goes into basically saying validation outcome are not solely determined by those who are designed or delivered the training and assessment. So under the old standards, under the current standards, it was like basically if you had delivered the assessment, you couldn't be the sole determinant of validating. Now, if you are the designer, yes, it goes the same way. So you want to have a combination. Again, the best way to do validation is to do it as a combination of people. So you have people who are delivering it, you potentially have the people who are designing it, you have potentially have like a compliance manager or operations manager or expert involved in the process. Undertaking validations on a group level, far more meaningful exercise, far more likely to actually get an outcome where you're going to come away with some improvements as well. Just having done this historically, you know, in a lot of different situations. Oh, I'm sorry, guys. You are not boring me. God, I hope I am not boring you. I'm very tired. I didn't sleep well last night, and it's very, 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 very late yesterday because I'm living in Queensland now. So yeah, those are just like probably the two main changes. It does still have information in there in relationship to, you know, where you're validating TAE products. Again, you know, we should always be taking that higher because it's very, very important. And then the last one that I wanted to note was which is validation occurs following completion of training and assessment by the first learner cohort. So it kind of it's now basically said in there that as soon as if you're rolling out a new product, that first cohort, you have to do validation after you've rolled it out to that first cohort, which again is very, very important. I think a lot of RTOs do that. You should be taking on feedback from the learners, from industry, but it does now very specifically mandate that validation occurs following completion of training and assessment by the first learner cohort. So guys, that is it for validation. A few changes to make there, but don't stress out too much. And of course, guys, by all means, if you can't be bothered updating your policies and procedures, because come on, who likes sitting there reading legislation? Only losers like me do that. However, if you want some help with it, we can definitely give that to you. What you need to do is reach out to the lovely Laura at anawire.org, or you can reach me at lauren@anawire.org. And we're more than happy to talk to you about how we can contextualize our policies and procedures to your systems, to your RTO and your business. We hope that helps, guys. That is it for validation. We will be moving on to the next standards in the next video. Hope you guys are finding this helpful as per usual. If you guys do, please like, subscribe, hit that comment button below. We will try and answer your questions as soon as possible. Feel free to disagree, but do so respectfully. Otherwise, guys, I hope you found this helpful. My name is Lauren Hollows for Anawire Education Services.